On MorningLine, thanks for joining us. Nick Barris along with Pat Nolan, our political analyst. We're both here, sitting here talking about Fred Thompson. If you haven't heard yet, the former U.S. Senator from Tennessee passed away this weekend. Word of that, 73 years old, recurrence, they said, the family of lymphoma. He apparently had been diagnosed with cancer originally back in 2004, beaten it, had come back, and it must have come along fairly suddenly here of late. Like I saw him last year around this time, he looked well, you know, all of a sudden it caught a lot of people by surprise, I think, this weekend, that, you know, aside from those very close to him, that he was that ill, but 73 years old. Now, you interviewed him, Pat, over the years, and I think, Mary, we have some clips that she just put together, you know, a chance to hear him and some of the questions you asked him. We kind of combined them. Let's just listen to those and then talk about it a bit, what he was like. Do you mind running those, Mary?
We have with us today a very familiar face for people who follow Tennessee politics. He's the star power, perhaps, for the Association of Justice. He's former Tennessee Senator Fred Thompson. Senator Thompson, thank you so much for coming in
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, I assume you've got lots of opportunities these days, including perhaps more movies and TV jobs. Why'd you want to become a lobbyist here in Nashville? Well,
I didn't necessarily. But this is a special situation for me. I grew up in, you might say, in and around our justice system in this state and in this country. I was in the courts here in Tennessee for over 30 years. I've been a prosecutor. I've been a defense lawyer. I've been various things before I got into politics. And then, of course, when you're in the legislative branch of government, the way I was, I found myself writing or trying to prevent the writing of laws that pertain to our justice system. So I feel like I know a little something about it. I participated in it. I've seen it from all sides. And when I was asked to come down and more or less join the conversation, of course, if you ever set foot on Capitol Hill, you know you got to sign up, and you know you're a lobbyist and all that stuff. So be it. But when I was invited to do that, I was more than happy to do that because I think it's really important.
All right, just a real clip, and we can, you know, brief clip where he looked well. That was 2011. We'll give you some background about what he was talking about there, though, Pat.
This was back during the tort reform bill that was going through the legislature, the bill that was ultimately passed. Fred Thompson came on to work for the trial lawyers to try to beat the bill. And it was interesting. He would go to the committee meetings and obviously talk to lawmakers, and everywhere he went, he was treated like a rock star because by that time he'd already done all of his movies and he'd been on Law and Order and all these other sorts of things. So he was much more of a celebrity than he was a lobbyist, but he had to become a lobbyist for that. He'd come back to Tennessee to do that, and the bill ultimately passed. The one he didn't want to have passed, but it was quite interesting to watch him. It was like the circus came to town every time he showed up there.
Yeah, and what's interesting, again, that's what I'm talking about. He does what he feels is best. Tort reform, and you know, we have Clint Kelly and other lawyers come on. Tort reform makes it, in my opinion, more difficult to sue, is basically what it does. It sets the bar higher in general. And a lot of the tort reform that's been passed here, it just does. Makes it more difficult to sue. And, you know, he's a lawyer first. This was clearly something that was being passed by the conservative legislature.
Well, and the Governor Haslam was very supportive of it. It was one of the achievements he had in his first administration, but obviously there were people on the other side, and trial lawyers are generally considered to be more Democrat.
Maybe more Democrat.
So it was a little bit different for Fred Thompson.
Yeah, exactly.
But Fred Thompson is a lawyer. He's been a trial lawyer too, so he had a difference of opinion about that. And I don't think this was just a for-hire situation for him. I think he felt that way personally about it.
That's the way he is.
And that's why he got involved. And yeah, I had forgotten until I came in this morning that he had come on the show back in 2011. I have trouble remembering some of the things that happened before I had my stroke, and I didn't look quite as fat before the stroke. I thought I was going to look a lot fatter doing that, which didn't look quite so bad.
No, you look good. All right. We have another clip here, I think Mary said, of maybe from that same interview. Let's have a look at that.
Now, how are you enjoying working on the Hill? Does your celebrity, being a senator and then also being a TV star and movie star, does that help you do your work, or does it get in the way? Well,
in the first place, I dropped in up there briefly one day and saw a few folks. This is more or less courtesy calls to a lot of old friends, some of whom I helped get elected, and have encouraged over the years. Those of us who have reached a certain age group, you know, think of these as the next generation. You know, young guys coming along. So it was a happy day for me, and dropped in to say a few people. But so far that's all I've been. So I'm not up on the Hill very much as far as that's concerned. But no, it's friendly. It's friendly. Know a lot of people. You know, you don't have to always agree on everything in order to be friendly, and these people here don't look at me as any kind of celebrity because they've known me and have known me for a long, long time when I was out here doing what they're doing. I was running up and down the road, you know, trying to get elected.
He's just so relaxed. People that talk like him, and that's the same way, I just like it. He's easy to listen to. And it's like he said, just because there's differences doesn't mean you can't be friendly.
Yeah, you saw in Fred Thompson there sort of the quintessential thing that he got from Howard Baker. Howard Baker was known for being a raging moderate. Howard Baker was his mentor, just as he was the mentor for Lamar Alexander. And you can sort of see that raging moderate going on there right through that, and the ability to be able to work with people even though you don't agree about everything.
Right.
And unfortunately our politics today is a whole lot of you have to agree with me on everything or I can't agree with you on anything, and that's one reason we don't get a whole lot done.
You mentioned Howard Baker, of course, another giant here in the state of Tennessee. I was reading, you know, a lot yesterday about Fred Thompson, and going back to the Watergate days, there was the statement, I guess, that came out where when President Nixon was notified that Fred Thompson, he kind of cursed and said, no, not that kid, and it was implied as though the president felt he didn't hold Fred Thompson, who was very young at this point, kind of just out of school, in high regard, like maybe he didn't think he was smart or something like that. Do you know the story I'm referring to?
Yeah, I read that in the obituaries today, and,
okay.
and I'd have to say I was not that familiar with that particular clip, but Richard Nixon said a lot of things in those tapes that don't, obviously, probably didn't look very good at the time, look even worse in the light of history, and don't look very good at all in terms of that's not the kind of thing you'd expect a president to say.
And I wonder, though, in that context, was he viewing Thompson and Baker at that point as being perhaps allies of his in some way, thinking they're going to investigate and show there's nothing going on here? Or
well, certainly there was certainly a lot of heat on Howard Baker at the time to be behind his president, because he was the leading Republican on the Senate Watergate Committee. Now, this is a long time ago. It's a little hard to think about the way people thought in those days. But and though he was the head of that, and people thought, well, you know, Sam Ervin was the Democrat, and they knew the Democrats would come hard after the Republicans about this. And I think they hoped that Baker would do that. And of course, Baker was a loyal Republican, but he was not going to be a loyal Republican to the fault that he ignored other things. And remember, and you also saw this in some of the writings that came out, Fred Thompson apparently played some role in helping Howard Baker put together his famous line from the Watergate years. What did the president know, and when did the president know it? It has lived on throughout the years and sort of becomes the standard every time there's a scandal in the White House.
That question's always asked.
It goes right straight to the top. Okay, this appears to be what happened. Did the president know it, and when did he know it?
Oh, you hear it time and again, and that's
it came from Howard Baker. And apparently, Fred Thompson played some role in helping him craft that
They worked together through all of that.
Did.
But again, the point being that Fred Thompson, again, as you said earlier, was the one that kind of got to the heart and made public the fact that the president had been recording all these conversations in the White House.
And it changed everything.
And it changed everything along those ways. All right, again, the number is 737-7587. I'm wondering, as we think back about Fred Thompson's legacy, he didn't have a huge, long legacy in politics by the standards of perhaps some of his colleagues. But what kind of legacy do you think there will be for him? How will he be remembered?
I think he'll be remembered as somebody who, in his time, was willing to work across the aisles to do things that he thought were important in Washington. He only ran 2 elections, but he was an extremely popular politician, and one whose popularity transcended leaving office. As I said, even as recently as the last cycle last year, he was the kind of person that you could put out a news release that said, Fred Thompson's endorsing me. He sent out a letter for me in my district, or he's put out a radio spot for me. That would be important to people. It would help you get votes. People liked Fred Thompson. I think you've heard that from everybody today. Even if you weren't in his party, you liked Fred Thompson. And, you know, we had a couple people in here today sort of indicate, well, I was a Democrat, which may have indicated they didn't vote for Fred Thompson, and maybe they didn't. But trust me, he couldn't have gotten some of the vote totals he did if he didn't have some Democrats come over and vote for him.
You think there was crossover, for sure?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, when you get the kind of numbers that he got both in 1994 and then 2 years later in 1996, he had to have gotten some Democrats and certainly some independent votes to cross over, if you want to use that term, because in Tennessee, there's really not a crossover because we're not registered by party.
Right. But yet, he had unbelievable numbers. More than Frist's?
I'd have to go back and look to be sure, but I think it was one of those crazy years, and we don't have it very often in Tennessee, where both of the Senate seats were up. One of them was scheduled to be up, the Sasser seat, and
that's right.
Of course, remember Sasser beat Senator Sasser, who everybody thought would be, had he gotten reelected, was going to be the majority leader of the U.S. Senate. It turned out there was a majority leader in that race, but it was going to be Bill Frist a few years later.
Yeah, a few years later. But you know what I wonder is, I just watched some of the clips with you, and then in some of the ads you saw in the one story we showed, I wonder why it is more politicians, and maybe it's they can't because they're just not that way. As you said, be it him as a candidate, be it him as a lobbyist, I'm sure, be it him as an actor, he more or less just played himself. I mean, his acting, and I thought he was good. Well, one reason he was good is primarily because I don't think it was a stretch for him to play a lawyer, and he did it really well. And so why don't more candidates take a page out of his book and just be themselves?
Well, I think that that's a good question, and I guess what I would say is that the one thing that voters do, whether you're acting or whatever they can spot a phony a mile away if they think what you're doing is not really you. Now, what you're doing may really be you, and they don't like that. That's part of it. You get some people who say, well, if that's who you are, I don't want to vote for that. But being yourself is very important, and it comes over quickly. People, I think that's true in this business. If you try to be something on the air that you're not really, it comes through, and people sense that.
Yeah, they'll pick it up after a while. After a while, and then the other part of his equation is he had so much to be proud of and to command attention with, but he had humility. It seemed like he wouldn't try to one up. Most politicians don't, because it comes off badly. But I mean, he just seemed, to genuinely, like in that interview with you, my friends don't view me as a celebrity because they've known me and they know what I'm like.
Well, those people that came up and got his autograph and took his picture with him up on the hill, they may have felt that way about it. But I want this for my daughter. I want this for my wife. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But he was a celebrity when he went up. That one day he went up there. I mean, he may have gone around to do the courtesy calls, but it was like a presidential candidate had come by. I mean, all the cameras were there.
We're all over him.
And everybody wanted to get his autograph and his picture made with him.
All right, we'll take a break on that note. Come back with our final segment, where we'll also talk about, well, he had a relationship with Lori Morgan, did he not? Before Sammy Kershaw. The celebrity aspect of it.
I don't know the timeline of it, but yes, at one point he did.
We'll get into that and more. We can take a few more of your phone calls if you'd like. Our final segment talking about the passing of a Tennessee legend, really, with everything that he did and left an amazing life, Fred Thompson, right after this. Stay with us.